So in this video, we are going to explore the best way to use your calculator. Now, this might sound like a waste of time and really trivial because you know how to use a calculator. But let me stress just how many times I've seen errors in problems because somebody A is not using their calculator properly, or B doesn't know the most efficient way to use it, so they make simple mistakes. So we're going to look at some of the types of calculations where we most commonly see inefficiency or incorrect use of your calculator. Let's start with scientific notation. Lots of times you'll see calculations that involve scientific notation. And if you're not familiar with scientific notation, we'll be discussing this in another video. But so scientific notation here, we have 1.25 times 10 to the 8th. Okay? If we have 1.25 times 10 to the 8th times 4, we can plug this into our calculator and figure out what the answer is. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at our calculator here. Now, yours might look very different, and that's okay. It'll have really similar buttons. Okay? The way that most students choose to put scientific notation into a calculator is by putting 1.25 times 10 in this little x to the y button. That's the power of 8. Okay, and this gives us 1.25 times 10 to the 8th. Take this times 4, and this tells us the answer to this problem is, in this case, it's 500 billion, or 5 times 10 to the 8th. But there's a much easier way to do this. Okay, instead of actually typing in the times 10 to the power of 8, you can exploit this EXP button. On your calculator, it might also be EE. But this means times 10 to the power. So if we want to put in 1.25 times 10 to the power of 8, you can put this EXP button, and note here that that pops up times 10 to the 8th. So that's 1.25 times 10 to the 8th. We can take this times 4 and get our answer of 50,000. So being able to use the EXP button instead of typing in times 10 to the 8th will save you time. Okay, let's try another one. What if we have 4 divided by 1.25 times 10 to the 8th? Okay, let's figure out what this is. So let's pull up our calculator here. Okay, so a really common way of doing this, and I'm going to say up front that this is an error, a really common way of doing this is taking 4 divided by 1.25 times 10 to the 8th power. And when we end up here, we end up with 320 billion. Now this is the incorrect answer. Because of the same ideas we talked about in the last video, we used order of operation incorrectly. Okay? But when it comes to scientific notation, we can fix this problem really easily because we can put it in as 4 divided by 1.25, use your EXP button, to the power of 8. Now this gives us a value of 3.2 times 10 to the negative 8th, and that's the correct value. Okay, what if we have 26 squared? Now you probably know how to do this. Okay, so let's go ahead and clear this out. Most calculators have an x squared button specifically. If your calculator does not have an x squared button, you probably have this x to the y power. So you can do this problem using either of these buttons. So we have 26 squared, the answer is 676, or you can do 26 to the power of 2. So the answer is 676. How does this change if we have 26 to the 5th power? So now in this case, we cannot use the x squared button. So now we have to use this x to the y button. So 26 to the power of 5. This gives us an answer of 11,000,000 881,376. What about roots? Okay, so can we figure out the square root of 26? Okay, so some calculators, most calculators in fact, will have a square root button. So we see here we have our square root button, so it's the square root of x. So if we put in 26, click our square root button, this tells us the square root of 26 is 5.099. Okay? If you do not have a square root button, that's okay, because the square root is mathematically equal to saying 26 to the power of 1/2. Okay, so you can figure out the square root of something even if you don't have a square root button on your calculator. So in this case, we would do 26, click the XY button, to the power of, now use your parentheses, so parentheses 1 divided by 2, so 1 divided by 2 is 0.5, we click equals, this gives us the square root of 26. Okay, let's see another example, but this time it'll be the fifth root. So if we want to figure out the fifth root of 26, okay, there's very, very, very few calculators that'll have a button that looks like x to the power of y, right? So there's very few calculators that will have this button. But you can take advantage of the fact that the fifth root of 26 is 26 to the 1/5 power. Okay? Whatever this value is the denominator in your fraction in the exponent. So the square root is the 1/2 power, the cube root will be the 1/3 power, the fifth root is the 1/5 power. So we can use our calculator to figure out the fifth root of 26. So we want to do 26. I'm going to use this x to the y button, so x to the y power. So you see that pops up here. Okay, so my y value, I want to use my parentheses, 1 divided by 5, close my parentheses, so 1 divided by 5 is 0.2, and now I click equals, so the fifth root of 26 is 1.92. So unfortunately, I can't teach you how to use your calculator individually, but what I can do is really stress the fact that all scientific calculators have really similar features. The things that I think are most important for you to really find and figure out how to use is your EXP button. So it'll either be EXP or it'll say EE. That button you can use in place of times 10 to the power of something. Okay? Be comfortable using your x to the y button. Okay? Because lots of times in this class we'll have to we'll have exponents that we need to use in our calculations. And it would also be really useful for you to be comfortable using the parentheses on your calculator, because that helps you avoid order of operation errors.